All right, good evening. We're going to begin our public hearing on the proposed superintendent's contract tonight. Um, I'd like to thank Andrew Manna for making this slideshow for us so we could kind of review the things that we've talked about. Um, so to begin with, we're going to, the duration of the superintendent's contract will start on July 1st, 2023 through June 30th of 2026. It's an extension of his contract by 3 years. As far as the position, it includes serving the school as a superintendent during the term and performing duties generally recognized as normal functions of an Indiana public school superintendent and as outlined in board policy. I will take the time to just make mention of the things that have changed because everything else will have stayed the same, and then I won't bore you to death. The salary is staying the same at $133,500 beginning July 1st, 2023. We have, in the second sentence there, made accommodations that future increases in the superintendent base salary above shall be the same as the percentage raise given to the corporation teachers. So those are both the same. I just wanted to highlight them. So I guess I've already contradicted myself, but okay. As far as health insurance, those costs are also going to remain the same for the 3-year extension of the contract. And I think would you like me to read it, or are we all familiar with that? Okay. All right. As far as dental, life, and disability insurance, the change that we made is on item B, the term life insurance. The board shall make available term life insurance for superintendent and shall contribute the entire premium per year for $350,000 in coverage. This is an increase to a $150,000 coverage that he had with the previous contract. Okay, as far as expenses, the board agrees to pay superintendent's education-related professional membership dues for those memberships mutually agreed upon. Superintendent shall be permitted to attend a national conference, convention, or seminar each year to enhance his professional skills and knowledge. The board, in its sole discretion and upon advance notice and approval, agrees to pay all or some of the superintendent's reasonable expenses for such events. So here would maybe give us a couple of examples. His technology allowance is going to remain the same. As far as vehicle allowance, this was a change that we made. The board shall provide a stipend of $300 per month to superintendent for the use of his private automobile for corporation business purposes during the contract term. This is an increase from a $200 allowance that we had before. This increase, or I want to say his travel expenses are things like meetings or conferences, trainings, and we give him this allowance rather than him charging the corporation for mileage, which, I mean, obviously the increase makes sense to me as I think the government mileage rate increased last June and then again in January of this year. So, yeah. Anyway, so that's the change there. As far as leave days, the only thing that has changed here is letter C, vacation days. The superintendent shall receive 25 days of paid vacation each year. This is an increase of 5 days from 20 days. I also would like to make the comment here, I believe that maybe only 3 of the days that Dr. Glaze has taken in the last year has he been without a phone or communication to the school. So we've tried to encourage him to actually take vacation, but I know he's always on the clock. So anyways, so that's an increase there. Deferred compensation, that remains the same, which is our contribution to an annuity program. So all of this was written and recorded on April 21st with the Kokomo Tribune and April 26th with the Tipton Tribune. Okay, so I think that's my slideshow. At this time, we will take a few minutes to take comments related to the terms of the superintendent's contract from the public. It will be a 3-minute time frame for any comments, again, just in regards to whatever these terms of this contract is. Is there anyone who would like to make a comment tonight? Laura Satang.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. The purpose of this public hearing or meeting as it was advertised is to discuss and hear objections to and support for a proposed contract between the school board and the superintendent of our school. I wanted to focus on the provision in there about adjusting the salary base from time to time at the discretion of the school board during employment, because in my opinion, I feel this implies bonuses. If in fact you're looking to adjust his salary, I feel that that should come at the end of the contract when that's being negotiated. Because we're facing an economy that is in recession and finances are very tight and every penny matters, as evidenced by other proposals that you'll probably be considering down the road regarding extracurricular activities and charging boosters, etc., for transportation costs. I don't really feel comfortable that it would just be left up to your discretion, since you are elected officials, and that would imply those that vote should have a say in that. Since we pay the taxes and that go towards the operation of our school, and I feel that requires transparency and at least a hearing on the matter. And I honestly feel that money has potential to be spent elsewhere. Also in the proposed contract, again, that is stated in the contract, it does state the board and superintendent mutually intend to extend the contract to 2026 or until it's mutually or terminated. That was also other direct verbiage in the contract, and I don't support that clause, but I'm told that I can't speak to that issue till the public comment session in the I can't
Work
keep,
session?
I really can't keep this comment
It's okay.
part straight.
Yep, in the work session.
Until the work session,
Yes.
correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura Satang. Okay. Does anyone else have a comment in regards to the terms of the proposed superintendent's contract? Okay, then at this time, we will adjourn the public hearing. Thank you so much. All right, I should have said the work session will begin at 5:45. Okay, I'd like to call to order tonight's school board public work session. Tonight, our first item on the agenda is going to be with Scott Jaworski, correct?
Yeah.
You're going to take it? All right. We're going to talk about the attendance policy.
Let me steal this
Oh, are you
Apple TV if I can.
Hey.
I wasn't sure if I was first or not.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Jaworski.
Thank you. All right. There we go.
I know.
No, don't worry. It'll pop up in just a minute. There we go. That's what I wanted. Any excuse. All right. Yeah. All right. This is our TCSC attendance guidelines, kind of moving forward into this year. If you recall from a previous meeting, Mr. Leidy spoke about the increasing concern with attendance and its impact on student learning. I think our experience with virtual learning over the past few years has really highlighted the value of in-person instruction. Students learn better when they're able to interact with and collaborate with peers and with their teachers in a safe learning environment. Again, we can provide the necessary resources to control those conditions while they're in school. When they're not in school, we don't control those conditions. And so that is a point of emphasis that we are going to have going forward into this 23-24 school year. We want to establish guidelines that re-emphasize the importance of daily attendance in the classroom. And we also wanted to increase the level of communication between the families and the schools as we try to work collaboratively to get kids in school. Again, we're on the same team. So again, we need to stay on the same page. We wanted to be responsive to student needs. You know, if there's a medical reason for absences, what can we do to facilitate learning for that student, however that looks? If there's a behavioral reason the student's not attending school, what interventions or accommodations can we put in place to help that student get back into school? Because like I said, we want them here in person. That's going to be the best way for our kids to learn. Again, we wanted to be more consistent across the buildings. I know that's something that it can be rather confusing and frustrating for parents if you've got certain things are being excused one building versus another. And again, that relates back to that increased level of communication. If we want to be on the same page, we have to read from the same book is the way that I kind of view it. So again, making sure that we're reading from that same playbook and eliminate the confusion and frustration about how attendance is handled with families who have students in multiple buildings. So what you guys have in front of you and what I've got displayed up there, and I apologize to the crowd that this is awfully small. If you'd like to take a closer look at this later, I can come see me. But essentially what we have here is our attendance guidelines. This is essentially what our administration are going to be following regarding communication and interventions for our students based off of attendance. So just as before, pretty much in the first handful of absences a student has in the year, we communicate home to families through our attendance secretaries. That's either a phone call home or an automated message from PowerSchool through Bright Arrow, letting them know, hey, your child is absent today. Make sure that you're aware of that, because sometimes maybe the parents thought they dropped their kid off at school or expect their kid to be on the bus to get to school and they never showed up. So again, it's always an open line of communication. Let families know that your child has been recorded as absent for the day. One of the first significant changes we wanted to make in this was responding to parents after the fifth absence, specifically from the building principal. If we really want to emphasize the importance of attendance, we thought it was really important for our building administration to be involved in that communication directly. Again, sometimes it's just a matter of, having a hard time getting my kid to school. Okay, well, is there something that we can do to help with that? Is there something that your kid is maybe having some concerns with that we can alleviate at our end? Maybe it's, and we have several discussions about this, what if there is some legitimate medical concern that's keeping that kid out for 5+ consecutive days? For example, one issue that came up, we talked about kids practicing football at the end of the summer and they tear their ACL, and then suddenly they're not able to come into school for a week or two to start the year. Getting that communication earlier and making sure there's understanding of, okay, why is the student not attending school? Is there a legitimate reason? Is there just reasons that we can work through together as a team? Again, increased communication is kind of the goal of this. So that's where that fifth absence conference with the administration comes into play. From there, again, absences 6 to 8, we continue with the attendance secretary notifications. And then once we get beyond that, once we get to that ninth absence, that's when we start having our attendance review conference scheduled. Again, that's an opportunity for the building principal, after they've outlined, hey, at your fifth absence, once your kid's missing a lot of school now, the equivalent of a week of school has been lost. Here are the consequences that would happen once we get to our ninth absence, or here are some interventions or supports that we can offer before we get there. If we get to that ninth absence, then that's going to trigger an attendance review conference. So the family be invited to come in, meet with the principal, meet in with the school to identify, okay, what's the cause for all these absences? We're getting close to that 10 days, and once you're getting close to 10 days, you're getting really close to the line that the state draws as far as attendance over the course of the year. You're trying to keep what I believe it's 94% attendance rate. Once you pass 10, suddenly you become a statistics against the school. And so we want to try to catch them, obviously, before we get to that statistic. And so once you have that attendance review conference, there's a few avenues that can branch off from there. So if they are for medical reasons, or if there is a continuing medical reason for the kid can't be in school, and it's going to last more than that 1, 2, 3 days, and when it gets to 9 days, we can offer a letter of incapacity. That's something the family and their physician would complete. What that essentially does is it excuses those students' absences, saying, hey, there's a medical reason why the student cannot participate in school in person. And there is communication from the physician to the school directly about what supports that student might need medically to support them, to help them be successful in school, while either virtual, or how to get them into school, whatever kind of additional supports they may need. Interventions could include, again, a modified school day. We talked about in some rare circumstances doing a type of virtual learning with our TCSC staff. That would really depend on the needs of the student and the availability of the staff and what is going to be best for that kid moving forward. There's the opportunity for homebound instruction for students who just physically can't get into the building. The school could potentially offer a homebound instructor. And then for sustained absences, ones that are the student is not going to be able to come in for months at a time, that's where we can potentially take a look at the virtual academy as an option for our students to take for medical purposes. If the principal doesn't see a reason to offer a letter of incapacity, if it's simply the kid just didn't feel like going to school this week, and it's been like that for the last 2 weeks, that's where we start having a conversation about, this is not an option. School is mandatory. This is a right provided by the state, provided by the Constitution. You need to make sure that you are providing your student education through the public education system, or if you want to, you can pull your kid out of public education. But regardless, if they're with us, we are required to provide them education. If you are not bringing them to school, you're withholding their right to education. So with that, we would then ask for a behavior contract to be signed, or attendance contract, should say, to be signed between the family and the school, which would include an additional 5-day extension of absences. Again, you never know if the kid ends up getting sick. The next day they're sick shouldn't automatically be a suspension, expulsion type deal. Again, this can also include a modified schedule. Receiving a 10th absence, again, prohibits a student from participating in field trips. That's something we took a lot of consideration into when discussing this as an admin team. Once you hit those 10 absences, understanding that when you start taking field trips, it's not just the one class you're missing, it's all the other classes you're missing as well. And those start racking up. And we thought that was a step that would help incentivize students that if you want to participate in school and you want to participate in these field trips, you need to start attending school. If families don't sign that behavior contract, or if there is no communication between the school and the family by that 11th absence, recommendation would be filed to the superintendent. With that recommendation for expulsion, that would not come with the traditional suspension that goes with it. Typically, when you get a recommendation for expulsion, there's usually a 10-day window where student is suspended for that time until an expulsion meeting can be held. When in the case of an attendance hearing, if the issue is the kid's not attending school, us saying the kid can't go to school is not really a solution in our perspective. Neither is expulsion, but at that point, that's one of the methods that we hope to implement to convince families like this is serious. We want to take this seriously. We want your kid in here. We need to have a conversation about this. Um, Again, like I was saying, if at 10 absences, the letter of incapacity wasn't completed or submitted, then regular communication home that there's been a recorded absence, and we'll continue the pathway through the 19th absence for a letter of incapacity. Again, if the letter of incapacity was nuts. Oh, sorry, the attendance contract. Sorry, the attendance contract had not been signed, or had been signed. Then we follow the procedures again as before. We notify families for each absence that they're out. We give those 5 grace absences before a recommendation for expulsion. Once you get to that 5th absence after the attendance conference, we're agreed to 5 additional days. Get your kid into school. Once you hit that, then it's another recommendation to expulsion. Come in, we have a meeting, we discuss how are we getting your kid in school? Why is your kid not getting in school? And if that continues simply because you don't want your kid to come to school or your kid doesn't want to come to school, then that leads to an expulsion meeting with me. If we get to an 11th absence and there has been no attendance review conference scheduled with the family, again, principal will again directly contact the family, make a report to probation or DCS, and file for educational negligence, truancy, and administration will file a recommendation for expulsion to the superintendent there. Again, that pending expulsion does not come with the suspension. If we got to the 15 absences and they were a student who signed that attendance contract, like I said, that would lead to a recommendation for expulsion. If we get to 19 absences for kids with a letter of incapacity, then a second review conference will be held. And when we have a few options there, either one, we extend an additional letter of incapacity. If it's something like, hey, they're coming back from a major injury, they need a couple extra days, sign the letter of incapacity. Doctors communicate with us about when and how they're going to be able to come back into school, and we take care of that need. If it's something where we get to that second attendance conference and we're like, hey, this is a long-term thing, like this kid is not getting back into school, we can look at either the Tipton Virtual Academy where they work from home, or if this is a case where, hey, maybe it's best you take the year to heal up, come back healthy next year, and we retain you for the following year. Those are the kind of conversations. Again, a lot of this, while I stammer a bit through this, I think the biggest thing to understand is that the whole purpose of this is to increase that level of communication between families and schools. We want to make sure that we are working collaboratively to find out what is the best solution for our kids. These are simply guidelines, fence posts, mile markers to let us know, hey, when we start getting kids getting to 10, 15, 20 days absence, we're not suddenly now reacting to it. We're reacting to it as early as 5 absences, and we're having constant communication with the family about how to get their kid in here. That's the number one goal. How it gets responded to by our administration, that's, again, that collaborative effort. As far as next steps go, we plan to implement this over the course of the next school year. We're going to be obviously monitoring the attendance data over the course of that year, reviewing and evaluating this plan on a yearly basis to make adjustments again for the following school year. I think it's important that we stick to this plan, follow it with fidelity, properly evaluate it, and then if there's any adjustments that need to be made, obviously we need to make those for the following year. Again, consistency for the families is also important through a school year. So with that said, like the mission statement says, we're working together for student success. I think this attendance guidelines really embodies that we're all trying to work together to help get your student into school and help make them successful. If you have questions, obviously you can contact me through my email or phone, or if you have questions right now, I'd be more than happy to try to answer those for you.
What would a student who has missed that 10th absence and there is a field trip be doing if they're not on the field trip? So like the whole 4th grade goes, would they be required, would there be someone to stay back with them to?
Yes, yeah, there would. Again, we'd have a plan in place to support that student. Odds are they would probably be working on either coursework from their class, or if they didn't have any particular classwork there, we have a few intervention options or additional work support to help keep that kid on pace or on grade level or at their particular level.
I would say that's probably more of a secondary issue than it is an elementary issue. We'll have students that'll miss a whole week of school, but by golly, they're there for the field trip. And so I I don't see that happening very often in elementary. It's just not. Just being honest.
So in terms of, do you, so what's going to happen if, so do you recommend, because we've had prearranged absences
Mhm.
forms. So do you still encourage parents to do those?
Yeah. So again, like I said, the whole point behind all this is keep that increased communication with a parent like that. If you know that your kid's going to be out for X amount of days, the way we had a conversation with this with their admin team is that it's not any different than when you have sick days as an employee. Like you've got those 9 or 10 days before any kind of consequence comes of that. As long as you're communicating with the administration, you have a plan in place of how you're better supporting your child. I think that's obviously always encouraged. One thing we're trying to accomplish with this is we're trying to emphasize, while we understand there are values and times where it's appropriate to pull your kid. Like I think of the times where I pulled my son from school because we wanted to take him to the museum, the Indianapolis Museum, and we wanted to have that experience as a family, and we thought that was beneficial for him for the time they lost. Did we make sure we communicate with the school? Do we make sure we communicate that to make sure anything that he's missing that we're catching up with? Yes, absolutely. Um, I don't think that's necessarily where we're more concerned with this. It's really the families and students where we don't get that communication from, that we need to make sure we have something in place that is a safety net for those families. Make sure, hey, let's not let your kid kind of start slipping on this. If it's get pulled here, get pulled there, out sick for X amount of days, we want to make sure that we have those touch points. Make sure that is everything okay? Is there anything that we can do to help support and get your kid in school? Right. That's a great question. And that's something that I know, at least in our high school, we've already had the conversation that they're going to take some time here in the last couple of weeks to sit down with their juniors, sophomores, and freshmen about talking about this particular policy. And as far as communicating this with the families, that's something that we're going to have continued conversations about. I know that's something that Rob mentioned at our meeting last month about, getting the word out to families, educating families on, again, the importance of education, the importance of getting your kid into school, and also what is this timeline specifically, or what is this flow chart? What are the consequences? My kid's out for sick one day, or out because they just weren't feeling it one day, or we're taking them out for a field trip ourselves. What happens when? Um, Communication for that is going to be important. How that gets communicated, we're still working out the details on that, but I'm sure there will be quite the campaign to push out for families. That's a great idea. We can absolutely look into that. I think that's a fine idea as far as making sure everybody who gets registered for the following school year is at least being has the opportunity to see it right. On top of the extra push that we're going to put, obviously, I would believe through social media and just an education process, whether that's back to school night, open houses, that type of deal. Attendance is going to be a point of emphasis for our school next year. It's probably one of the bigger factors of student success. Is if your kid's not here, odds are they're probably not going to be doing too well. So we will make sure that we do everything in our power to uphold our obligation to teach every kid here.
And on the flip side too, and you all know, kind of my feeling on retention, that when we get to a point where we've had students that have missed so much time, particularly in the elementaries, retention is really going to be something we want to consider. It's again, we can't expect kids to be on grade level when they're not here. So that's going to be something that is in the mix.
Regarding this letter of incapacity to attend school,
Hmm.
It asks for a doctor's
Yeah.
Some minimal medical information. My question is going to be, will our school system reach out to doctors, or is that contact with a physician's office purely the responsibility of the family?
Yeah, I think the family is going to obviously give this to the physician. Physician's going to fill this out. So then that gives us the opportunity that if we need to communicate with the physician directly, we would have that opportunity to do so. And again, the purpose of that would be to better meet the needs of that student. If there's something in particular in that student's diagnosis, whatever it might be, that, hey, this student needs this particular resource or intervention to be successful in attending school and moving throughout the school. Again, that could be something as simple as, access to the elevators so that they don't have to go up and down stairs, things like that. Something simple, just more communication between the family and school and physician, Again, like I said before, we're all on the same team. We're trying to play from the same playbook there.
I did have someone a couple of weeks ago contact me curious about this situation and wanted to ensure that at no time the school would reach out to a physician's office and speak to
No.
and speak. There would be absolutely no time that without a permission of family,
No.
the school would contact a physician.
It is-
It is completely separate.
That is strictly going to be for, hey, when the parents sharing this, we get an idea of exactly what is the needs for that student, and we're supporting those needs. Again, if that's something where we need to communicate with a physician, that would be through parents. Parents are going to make sure that they are a part of that conversation as well. Again, go back to the idea of we're all trying to work together. We're trying to put a plan together to support each of these kids coming to school.
We would have the parents sign a release to allow us to speak. We are not allowed to.
And they would not
contact-
be obligated to sign that release. It would be completely voluntary if that would be something that they felt would support their student.
Well, I mean, again, they potentially, if we're looking at an incapacity, highly encourage them to allow us to speak with the doctor or to allow us to have at least this documentation. Again, this is not because we want it. We just want to make sure that, you know, and I suppose they can say no. But again, it would make it very hard for us to use this letter of incapacity.
Sure.
I mean, so there's, and again, it's not that we want to find out all of everything about this situation, but it does help us if we have a dialogue with the physician, and we can help to monitor the situation and hopefully help the child.
So what you're saying is it's hoping to bring alongside another team member
That's really what
into
we're
the
looking at.
mix.
Really, very much what we're looking at. I've been in situations where this has worked extremely well, and you know, everybody on the same team, everybody's there and listening and hearing the same things. It really can make a huge difference.
A very basic question. Is this just unexcused absences or all absences?
So we're going to follow this for all absences. And when I say follow this for all absences, the plan is essentially when we have communication. This is a roadmap or milestones for when we communicate with families. So if they have 5 unexcused absences, we're contacting home. They have 5 excused absences, we're contacting home. If they have 3 excused and 2 unexcused, we're contacting home at 5. We're contacting home at 9. It's about getting that communication with family, making sure that, hey, understand that for good reasons or for not good reasons, we want to know why your kid is not in here and what we can do to help support that. So this encompasses all of those. Now, again, how we handle those, that goes back to that attendance review conference. Once you get to that 9th, then we need to have a serious conversation about what is it specifically that's stopping your kid from getting here, and what do we need to do, what steps we need to take to make sure that they are getting the education that they need. Again, whether it's medically based, not medically based, or they're just simply not communicating with us at all.
Right. So a student who misses 9 absences due to a surgery and they're in communication with you and they're doing their work.
Correct. There's no like attendance contract or recommendation for expulsion or anything like that. That's going to be a, hey, let us know, sign this letter of incapacity. Then that opens up a few avenues for how we can support you, whether that's the virtual academy, whether that's a virtual learning for a particular option, if that's a good option for the students, or whether it's we're going to withdraw from medical leave because there's no way my child can come in for the remainder of the school year and earn any kind of credit or learn anything meaningful because they need to focus on their health and their recovery.
94% goal. Is that all absences?
Yes. So the way the state requires that we define excused and unexcused absences, and the way we define it is excused is for medical purposes, unexcused is everything else. The state, while they make us define that, an absence is an absence to the state. So whether it's 6 excused and 3 unexcused or vice versa, they see it as your kid's not in school, your kid's not learning. So your kid's not in attendance, that's going to be recorded on the GPS system.
There are several exempt absences.
Correct.
And exempt is a state recognized code, so that would not count as an absence. It would be an exempt from school for that period of time.
And I have that list. If you're curious what the exempt items are, we can. Yeah.
Now I have a very, you mentioned the difference between elementary and secondary. Student has trouble getting up and keeps missing first block.
Mhm.
But they come in the afternoon.
Mhm.
They're not absent for the whole day.
Right.
You know, if they miss the same class 10 times, I assume it's the same issue.
Right. Well, the way that we document attendance and absences is that if the student is here for more than 50% of the day, but less than the full day, then that's a half day attendance. If they're here for the full day, that's a full day attendance. If they're here for less than 50% of the day, they're recorded as absent for the day. So as far as, whether they're missing the same period over and over, you're speaking specifically to secondary education. That's going to be more about communication, identifying those patterns. We have our attendance secretaries who can monitor that. Our assistant principals are on top of attendance as well. That's going to be a matter of, if you start seeing that pattern of a particular class period being missed over and over, we can follow these same policies. If you see the kids missing it consistently over and over, it's about communication, identifying why is the student missing this particular class all the time? What can we do to make sure your kid's not missing that particular class?
The other side of that would be, since high school has credit, when you start to rack up absences in a certain block or certain period, we do have the capacity to deny credit.
Yeah.
And that would be another avenue we look at. We don't like to do that, but we don't like to do any of this. We would just love to be able to wave the magic wand and everybody be here and everything would be great. But it's again, we've sent this through our attorneys. They've looked at it. Everything is legal. We're just trying to figure out a good system that has a lot of supports aligned with it, but also has some teeth when we have to use it. We hope that we don't have to.
The comment that I would have is putting on my hat of an elementary school parent.
Mhm.
I had a kindergartner who racked up 11 days. She was home with me all those 11 days. She was ill, truly ill. I never took her to a doctor because I'm not going to take her to a doctor when she has a fever and then she doesn't.
Right.
What is our, I guess that as a parent, you hear unexcused absence.
Right.
Or medically excused absence, those being the two options. So as this is being communicated out and fleshed out, I think that there's quite a difference between an attendance decision for parents with a kindergarten child and perhaps a sophomore. Maybe I'm looking at that, and I recognize that having uniformity through the whole buildings, that's one of our goals. I am wholeheartedly on board with that.
Are you talking about perception?
Perception. It feels pretty teethy for this policy feels pretty teethy, pretty rigid for our elementary, our youngest students.
Yeah.
I'm in support, absolutely. I'm not saying that there needs to be a change. I'm just saying it doesn't feel very welcoming
Right.
to our families, hearing expulsion,
Right,
that
right.
kind of thing. And I recognize this first time I've seen this, first time you said it to me, not an attack in any way, just saying perception wise in the way it feels.
Totally understand. And we had conversation about that, and particularly with our elementary administration about, how does this look, particularly in those earlier grades, those primary grades, when we know that there's going to be more absences with those kids than you would expect in higher grades. And I agree with you, especially with elementary and really for all of our students, but expulsion is never our goal. But there does need to be the purpose of an expulsion meeting, and the recommendation for that is that is going to draw families in. I get a pretty good attendance from families when we get to that point. Again, that's not something that we want to seek out. It's not something that we want is to get to that level. That's where, again, I go back to the primary purpose of this is to increase that communication. I would assume that you communicated very frequently with the administration at that point, or the state teacher, that, hey, in that case, we can work together through that. This is really more of, what do we do when we're not getting communication from families? How do we respond? Do we just let it continue to happen and say, well, that's too bad? Or do we say, hey, we got to put these different interventions in place that are going to bring families in to have a serious conversation about the importance of attendance in school?
And I think it's a when in that situation, I still think it would be, especially if you've got someone who's been communicating directly, to have that attendance review conference may be a good thing to do. Just to have that opportunity to talk to parents and kind of figure out what's going on. Is there anything we can do to help? You know, I remember as an elementary principal, I used to have parents say, "Oh, you know, the kids are just so tired. They want to go home. They want to do this." I remember that. And I would say, you just got to make them go. Make them go. You got to make them stay the whole day. And I had this great conversation and dialogue. And then after a month or two, they were pros at kindergarten. They were awesome. They were able to do whatever. But again, having that conversation, that opportunity. So I think the attendance review is, again, just a conversation. So, hey, come in, let's talk about this and see how we can work out together. And again, we're not going to expel kindergartners. It's just the way that we're going to look at that. And, you know, so there's going to be a little bit of a different.
Back to Amber's question about calling the doctor. To me, that seems a little, I mean, is that legal for us to be, I mean, lawyers say it's okay for us to call the doctor's office.
We cannot call the doctor's office unless we have a signed release.
And once you have that, you're able, who makes
Yeah.
that phone call?
It could be the nurse, likely would be the nurse, could be the guidance counselor. Yeah. Again, I mean,
I mean, I know that'd be in like a really
it would be a very different situation.
Right.
And so we just want to, again, it's not, we can't legally call. I mean, we have to have the parent permission to do so. And that's a pretty normal process if you are doing the incapacity letter. And that's all part of Indiana code. So that's all very legal. But again, it would have to be signed off that we were able to do that.
I guess I was just hoping that it would be like the nurse calling and not the principal.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, we would have the nurse, if it's something that is maybe more on the social emotional side, it
Have the
might be the
counselor.
counselor because it just would make more sense.
Yeah.
So really it would probably depend on the situation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, I think moving on to here on our next item is the central office restructuring plan. Dr. Blaze?
Okay. Since I've been showing up on how to use the clicker, should I do it right? Currently, as you are aware, we do have a retirement from our Director of Student Services. It's going to be effective at the end of June. Prior to that, about 2 years ago, we also eliminated the Director of Operations position. At that point, we created an organizational chart which looked very much like this. Essentially, who reports to who is under who, and who does what. And so when we eliminated the Director of Operations position, I took on more of the Director of Operations side, except for the transportation, which we gave to Shane as Director of Student Services / transportation. So this was the change in the organizational chart, basically who is responsible for what when it comes down through the district. And just for some context, this was the job description for the Director of Student Services / transportation that we approved through probably 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago. I can't remember. Anyway, it was a bit ago. And then we allowed Shane to go into that position and to take over those responsibilities. That's next page. So currently, our Director of Student Services / transportation has most of these duties, and he has a lot more, but these are just kind of the highlights. Special services, which would be special education, state reporting, transportation, power school, and title grants. And again, title grants are federal grants, Title I, Title II, Title III, and Title IV, some of which have to do with students that are living in poverty. Some have to do with professional development for staff and training. And then like Title IV has kind of an all-encompassing kind of all three of those different areas can be used for Title IV. Title III would be specifically for non-English speaking students. So when we had some tentative conversation about this, and we talked about this specifically in the April personnel meeting, just about what we would do now that Shane is retiring and how we might try to fill that role. So what I created was a job description essentially for an assistant superintendent's position. Until 5 years ago, the corporation had an assistant superintendent. That position was dissolved and then created the director of operations and the director of student services. And you got a chance to take a look at that, I hope. So when we're looking at this situation, we're looking at, of course, funding sources for this particular role. We would use ESSER 3. We have ESSER 3 money really until December 31st of 24. And then we would also use the education fund. Currently, the way we pay for Shane is half through operations and half through the education fund. So as we're looking at that, and as we're looking at the future, we would be able to save the corporation around $66,000, and that's after the ESSER 3. If we're looking at next year, it's probably going to be more like $120,000 because of the ESSER 3 dollars, and that also includes the new transportation head position. So that's everything. So that's just a whole recalculation of how we do our central office. So what does it look like? Essentially shifting responsibilities. So looking at with special services, the director of special services and also now we'll also have title grants would report to the assistant superintendent. And they would also, the coordinator of special ed would manage the special ed grant, and also he is the PAR for our case conferences. He is essentially the representative of the school in case conferences, as well as for the co-op that we are a part of with CASIC, and also taking over the grants. Now, what will happen with the grant is we like to have somebody that writes the grants and then somebody that essentially administers the grant. So where the coordinator of special ed and title grants would write the grants for title, the assistant superintendent would manage the funds and figure out where that's spent. State reporting. State reporting is a crazy world. We learned a little bit about it today. And so that's going to be a responsibility that would be divided between the assistant superintendent and superintendent. Again, a major role for the director of student services. Transportation, the superintendent would take over transportation with the transportation head reporting directly to the superintendent. Power school, again, assistant superintendent, power school coordinator, and then title grants, basically how that's working. Title III, we have a Title III coordinator / instructor. So we pay her half the day to manage Title III and ILPs, and then the other half of the day she provides services for our students. Okay, so this would be kind of the proposed organizational chart as we're looking at this. So obviously, everybody's going to pretty much report to me, but this kind of gives an idea of how things would flow. So direct reporting for the coordinator of special ed / grants, for the coordinator of English learners, they would directly report to the assistant superintendent, as well as Lori Crawford, who takes care of Power School and transportation. And then as we're doing right now, we actually team up and take, Scott and I actually work and evaluate the building administration, and they also report to us as well. Randy Carlisle, who would be our transportation head, would report directly to me as well as the director of technology, food service, maintenance, and facilities. And this is just kind of in the nutshell the different responsibilities that each of these hold. And questions?
That's good. Okay, thank you. At this time, we will move in our work session to any public comment that we have. And tonight, we've just had one person sign up, Laura Satong.
We live in a reality that parents are no longer bound to attend a school based on their zip code. Their school choice and now money follows the student. Tipton really needs to focus on enrollment and not just being satisfied with a few student pickups here and there, only to lose them perhaps in mid-year. We're like stagnant. When parents leave a school, they become the advertisement for reasons not to attend a school, and then word spreads. I'm sure some of you may have seen public posts, 2, 3, or 4 of them, that reflect reasons and experiences. We really need to raise the bar from just doing something good and set the bar higher to encompass all aspects and strive for excellence and not just settle. Tipton needs to refocus our priorities regarding those financial priorities by using money to grow our student body and not our administrative overhead. We're still in the throes of significant learning losses. Money needs to be used in the classroom that supports student achievement and on initiatives that give our educators the resources they need to ensure the standard is exceeded, as they are such an integral part of the reasons why education succeeds. Tipton needs to invest the finances needed for that to happen. So anybody in the leadership role of a school corporation is hired by the board. That person establishes the vision and culture and sets priorities based on policies and such that are presented for you, the board, to have the ultimate approval on, to be used as a template in any K through 12 school that they represent. It's not just a brick and mortar. It's a culture that should be reflective of Tipton's heart and who we are as a community. Tipton's my home. My kid goes to school here. I value the teachers, and we need to do better. I think we need to strive for excellence. So as a board, you get to decide what that next chapter for Tipton will be regarding any contract renewals. So you'll get to be decided how it's going to be written, whether there's going to be another chapter or whether it'll be the end of the story. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Laura. At this time, we will adjourn the work session. Our regular meeting will start in 1 minute. I'd like to call to order our monthly school board meeting. To start with, let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I've asked Jason Springer to lead us.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, tonight we will begin first on our agenda with comments from the community. We had one person sign up, Laura Satong.
I just signed up to speak on the agenda item about the creation of the assistant superintendent position. I don't support recreation of the assistant superintendent position. I feel the school is very top-heavy in the administrative area, and I feel that we need to direct our finances in other areas that's going to build our community, our school, and to make it an outstanding place that parents get to choose to come to, because there's a lot of choices and options out there where to go. We've had positions like the instructive coach in the elementary eliminated because ESSER funds, it was a initiative that was working, that was really successful. And now we're asking to take those ESSER funds and to create an administrative position and to take it out of the hands of the schools in order to grow our school and to use it towards initiatives for students and staff to be successful in. I still don't understand. I know I asked Dr. Glaze this question earlier today with the new changes in legislation that now the superintendent's salary is to be paid out of operations, but yet we have an assistant superintendent taking half from the ESSER funds, then taking money out of the education to then transfer to operations funds to cover the other half of the salary piece. Does not make good financial sense to me. We're too top heavy here. I mean, I would assume with a superintendent, we'd need yet another secretary. Other aspects would come into play with that. We've already got fabulous people that report to Dr. Glaze and give reports on their various departments and things like that. We've operated with one since 2018. I recognize there was the operation position created, but then we've had other additions added to the school. I mean, Mr. Jaworski is such a fabulous asset to this school. We just need to stop. We need to start looking at where our money goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, next on our agenda is the consent agenda. Tonight we will approve of the agenda, approval of minutes from the public work session, April 11th, 2023, the regular meeting on April 11th, and the executive session also on April 11th. We will approve the claims for payroll on April 14th and April 28th, and the accounts payable claims for May 9th, 2023. We need the approval of the personnel report, approval to accept donations, and that we have a $3,000 from CoBank to the Charitable Lunch Fund, which was exciting. And then we will make an approval of the overnight field trip of the high school summer volleyball camp in LaPorte, Indiana. So I need a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items.
I move to approve the consent agenda items this evening.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments? Okay, I'll go ahead.
Sorry.
Nope, you're
I
fine.
don't know if I read, second guessing myself, but with the reassignment of Jessica, will we need another kindergarten teacher?
Right now, we always start with 4 and just kind of see where enrollment is. So that's kind of where we are. Yeah. So if we would get to a point where we needed 5, yes.
Okay, with that in mind, I'll go ahead and read the personnel report. For certified staff, we have the retirement of Cliff Hawkins as the PE teacher at the high school. We have the resignation of Trent Welbaum as special education teacher at the middle school. And we have Fred Henderson as the student council advisor for the high school. We have recommendations for Deja Pottis as the Tipton Elementary School art teacher. We have reassignment for Jessica Higginbotham from kindergarten teacher to reading specialist at the elementary school, and for Lexi Geiger from Title I paraeducator to elementary teacher at the elementary school. In our classified staff, we have the resignations of John Fowler as recess assistant at the elementary school, Anita Henry as the instructional assistant at the elementary school, and Odessa Hunter as the second shift custodian at the elementary school. And then we have the termination of Jessica Lee as the cafeteria worker at the middle school. Okay, at this time, we will move to the superintendent's report.
Thank you very much. Just a little bit about summer school. We're going to have a limited summer school this year, and this is mostly due to our renovation. We are going to have pretty much every building doing a major renovation during the summer. We are going to have IREAD 3 remediation. We're looking at 3 teachers and 1 special education teacher that would take care of that. Also looking at credit recovery for the high school, looking at 1 ELA, 1 math, and 1 credit recovery teacher, plus 1 special education teacher. We also will have summer band, which will include high school and middle school, as well as the summer ag positions. I did want to congratulate Tipton Motorsports, and this is our first year to do this particular event, and this again is the EV Kart Grand Prix. So they are in the forefront of technology as they are actually using a battery to power their go-kart, and they determine how to make it more efficient, how to make it fast, how to make it do all kinds of crazy things. We did have a little bit of they call it a disqualification. We had something that we didn't do right. So we actually started in the 25th place and finished in 11th, which is pretty impressive. The other part of that is a couple of days ago, they learned a little bit more how to tweak the battery a little bit, and the car goes a lot faster. So almost could have been like in top 5 had they known how to tweak that whole situation. But again, it's about learning, and sometimes with learning, you make mistakes and figure things out. And that's a good life lesson to learn. I want to thank Mr. Case for doing such a great job. And this is a club that meets during advisory period. So once again, a great experience for those kids, and we're really thrilled that we can partner with Purdue in this event.
How often will they have competition?
Once a year.
It's just once. Okay.
Yes, yes. And what they do is each year there's like a different challenge. So I don't know what next year's will be, but that will come out in the fall. And so that's something that they will get to do. They're kind of sad because they don't get to reconstruct the cart. So part of the deal this year is just constructing the cart, but they don't reconstruct it. They just tweak it and make it better. So again, I felt like that was an outstanding opportunity for our kids, and good group of guys here. And once again, using their club time to learn about battery technology and how to make all of those working parts more efficient. So we do have our employee appreciation banquet. We will be honoring our retiring personnel, also giving out years of service pins, and also announcing Teacher of the Year for each of our buildings. I did want to share, we did have our cookout yesterday, and we actually ran out of hamburgers because we had more people participate than we've ever had, and which is excellent and kind of shows the culture of the building. And we also have the highest number we've had in several years of employees that are attending the appreciation banquet. We have 145 signed up. Typically we have around 110, 115. So very excited about that, and just kind of goes to show you Lots really happening. Okay, summer projects. Did want to talk a little bit about some summer projects. First of all, we do have the summer paving that we discussed in our last meeting, and we're still working on getting some of those questions refined and figured out. So that will be happening in July so that we can avoid the drum corps, honestly. We are going to do the tree cutting, the evergreens between the football and the baseball. We've reached out and received a bid for $17,000 to do that. And they also will grind the stumps. If you remember correctly, when we had a pretty strong wind, we had one of those trees come down. Again, the nature of those types of trees, they just don't have very, very deep root systems. And so being able to take those, and get them cut down will probably save us time and also damage in the future. Ag bathrooms and entrance E, we're using ESSER 2 funds to upgrade those bathrooms. They were in the initial package for the high school. It came in at $86,000, and we decided that we could probably do it cheaper. So we're doing it for about $6,000. So that's going to happen this summer, and our folks will be doing a lot of that. Exterior door replacement. We have a couple of doors that are in need of replacement, exterior doors, around $2,000, and then some interior doors for science and robotics, and around $3,000 for those. General painting of the curbs. We do this annually just to kind of make sure that we have the no parking zones and all of that, those areas that are well marked, and people know what's going on there. We have some dead trees. If you've been around campus, we do have some dead trees. We will be cutting those down. And then also looking at sealing the walkways around the athletic fields. And again, as you can see, a lot of this we're doing ourselves, and it's just part of the summer projects. We do have this outside vendor, which will either be rowing or blades, and we're actually trying to get a bid from a third. Really a security camera installation, and this is something we've been talking about for a period of time. We've just really had some difficulty getting quotes. So they're starting to come in now, so we'll be able to get a fix in on exactly what that cost is going to be. We're also do late summer mulch to be ready for the start of the school year, and that's typically around $1,200. Again, we'll put it out ourselves. Parking blocks and bollards for the tennis courts. That's going to be about $1,600 in summer repairs. And we're also looking at some exterior signage and sidewalk repairs and getting a quote from R.L. Turner, and then pool pump of around $11,000. So this is pretty typical of the kind of summer repairs that we have to do just to maintain everything. Outside of the ESSER funds that we're using, this is going to be well under $50,000 total. So feel like that definitely things that we need to do, and definitely things that we need to make sure are kept up for our summer. That's it.
Before we move on to the financial report, we should probably vote for the consent agenda. So all those in favor of approving our consent agenda items signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we will move on to our financial report. Would you like to do that?
I'm doing it.
Okay.
I know you guys have missed me doing the financial report. You're probably going to say no. But anyway, okay, just to let you know, our cash balance in the education fund is $365,000. Operations fund, $202,000. Debt service, $1.6 million. And then rainy day, just a shade under $2.3 million. Brooke has included some information. Talking a little bit about the reconciled February ADM and that impact. Also talking a little bit about how much the interest payment that we have for this last month. Again, $32,000 in interest is pretty awesome. So that's again a a great opportunity that we have with the cash balances that we have to be able to draw that much interest. So the upside of high interest rates. And then you'll see the delivery of the activity bus is delayed due to a paint issue and a recall. So we got a little bit of a reprieve there. So we're not exactly sure when it's going to come in, but that the later is the better. We did get some good news on the circuit breaker, which will give us about $180,000 additional funding. That's, I think with the AVs kind of going through the roof right now and all of the changes happening with the property values and everything, I think perhaps they overestimated that a little bit. So we'll take that anytime it's in our favor. It's typically not. So we'll take it anytime we can get it.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is old business, and we don't have any, so we'll move on to new business. Tonight we are making consideration to approve a contract between the school corporation and Franciscan Health. In March, the school corporation was informed by IU Health that they would no longer provide athletic training within the schools. Thankfully, Dr. Condit connected with Franciscan, who is willing to hire Burke Emmert and provide athletic training services. In your packet is the 3-year contract between Franciscan Alliance and Tipton Community School Corporation for athletic training. Corey Fernung, School Corporation Athletic Director, and Dr. Glaze have reviewed the contract and recommend the approval. Need a motion and a second.
Motion consideration to approve the contract between TCSC and the Franciscan Health.
Does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
Jen, I would just like to extend thanks to Dr. Condict, Dr. Glaze, the leader at Franciscan. Franciscan is not in our community, but they're willing to support our community where IU Health backed away. And just really grateful for those leaders working together to be sure that our students don't lose support. So thank you.
Next is the consideration to approve the 2023-2024 student breakfast and lunch prices. Annually, the Indiana Department of Education recommends increases in student breakfast and lunch costs. The Department of Education recommendation for the 2023-2024 is a 10-cent increase, which you can see in there, what our prices will be. All right, do we have a motion and a second to approve those prices?
I move to approve the 2023-2024 student breakfast and lunch price.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Okay. Now we have the consideration to give permission to the superintendent to hire permanent and summer school staff between June, July, and August board meetings. This is a busy time of year. In filling positions, schools are in competition to find the best candidate possible. In addition, we do not know what may happen with some teachers who may be looking for other positions or deciding to leave for other reasons. By giving the superintendent permission to hire, we can go ahead and secure qualified candidates without having to wait for the board to act on resignations and allow us to get the commitment from the candidate before they accept another position. It is recommended that the superintendent be granted permission to hire staff between the board meetings of June, July, and August. Need a motion and a second.
I move to give permission to the superintendent to hire permanent and summer school staff between June, July, and August.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments?
Is this standard, or is this because of the labor things that are going on, or do we do this every year? I get the new guy question.
It's every year.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
Do you
right.
typically start with just our staff, offer positions to our staff?
If they're interested in transferring, we would of course allow them to interview or to do anything like that, of course. But typically, really, what this is for is more about resignations, because it just allows us to post a position without you approving the resignation. Otherwise, we would be really behind in that whole process. But you will approve all of them. It'll just be kind of after the fact. And again, we only do that in the summer just because it's a little crazy. Because last year, I think we had 19 changes in positions. And that's just kind of normal, the way the world is right now. And so had a lot of change for the good with those 19 positions. But still, it makes for a pretty busy time.
How many resignations do you normally get a year?
It just depends. Last year was just a little bit weird. We had people that moved out and moved with their spouse or either just got out of education, which is unfortunately one of those. We voted on one tonight where they're getting out of education, which is unfortunate. It just varies. You just never really know. Last year, like every school corporation, it had a very high number of moving around. And so that was just a kind of a common thing last summer. And primarily due to it was the first summer after COVID. Pretty much everybody stayed put during the COVID period time. And so it's just kind of the way it worked.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are going to have an approval of resolution to transfer funds. In your packet are miscellaneous items and clearing accounts that Indiana State Board of Accounts brought up during our recent audit. The accounts have been on the books since 2018 and 2019. These accounts cannot be corrected with voucher reversals, but actually require a transfer of funds. The transfers must be enacted through the approval of a resolution. Once approved, a transfer of funds can be completed. It is recommended that the Board of Trustees approve the resolution as written. I need a motion and a second to approve the resolution of transferring these funds.
Second that.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Lastly, we need the consideration to approve the reinstatement of assistant superintendent position. In 2019, the position of assistant superintendent was eliminated and replaced by two positions, director of operations and director of student services. With the retirement of Shane Clark effective June 30th, 2023, and elimination of director of operations in 2021, it is recommended that the assistant superintendent position be reinstated effective July 1st, 2023. This position will be funded using ESSER 3 funds and education fund dollars. The alignment of responsibilities is outlined during the was outlined during the work session. It's okay. It is recommended the position of assistant superintendent be reinstated and posted internally. I need a motion and a second to approve.
I move to approve the reinstatement of the assistant superintendent position.
Second that.
All right. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Okay. Next, we have other matters to come before the board. Does anyone have anything? Okay, then moving along, we have our upcoming advisory committee meetings. May 15th will be student achievement. June 19th will be business affairs, and July 17th will be the branding and PR committee. Our schedule of events on May 16th, we'll have a special board meeting to approve the Tipton Middle School project bids at 5:30. May 26th will be our last student day. May 30th will be the teacher work day. May 31st will be the final stage of the elementary school project begin. I think I'm saying that wrong. Let's try it again. The final stage of the elementary school project begins.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. May 31st, summer school begins on April 8th. It goes April 8th through the 12th, am I right?
I think 8 to 12. 8 to 12 each day.
Yeah, 8 to 12 each day.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, sorry.
When I'm reading a lot, my brain stops. Okay, June 3rd is graduation. June 5th is the student parking lot, fine coat and striping. June 13th is the monthly board meeting. No, let's just be honest. I did read through this and didn't catch it. It's okay. June 13th is the monthly board meeting. June 16th, I read 3, summer school ends. June 26th is the high school summer school final day. And so you don't have to listen to me mess up anymore. I would like to take a motion and a second to adjourn this meeting.
I move to adjourn the meeting.
Are there any? Oh, there's nothing. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We made it.
Looking at it.
Or I think